Few movies have the cultural resonance as 1989's Pretty Woman. I think we all know this movie. If you're tuning in today, you came in looking for this movie. Everybody seems to love this film, and for good reason. It's a relentlessly rewatchable movie. And despite the fact that it's a good movie, I think what we all turn to this film for is to watch Julia Roberts become Julia Roberts in this movie. She'd done some other stuff, and we'll talk about that later on. But in few instances has a star ever elevated themselves to super megastar like she does in this film. But there's also a lot of cool stuff that we can talk about with this film. And I invited my friend Leah Lagrone today. She's an assistant professor of history over at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. And she's actually studying about and writing about the history of prostitution. So she came to me asking me to do this film. I jumped at the chance to talk about Pretty Woman, its cultural impact, its resonance, the history of prostitution, the gendered roles of the way people look at prostitution, the legality of it, and questioning who saves who in this movie. And are Richard Gere and Julia Roberts still together this many years later? Guys, this was an absolute fun podcast. We laughed and laughed and laughed, but had some great conversations today about this movie. So I hope you're going to like it. We had a blast. So sit back and relax, because Pretty Woman is next on Historians of the Movies podcast. Leah Lagrone, what's going on?
Oh, just trying to start the semester. It is something.
Was today your first day?
No, yesterday. I don't teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, thank goodness.
That's very classist of you to say that. You're like, I don't teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I wonder if there's a day thing where we're like, oh, fucking no, I'm bourgeoisie. We're Monday, Wednesday up in here.
Yes, I'm a Monday, Wednesday person. Right. Tuesdays and Thursdays, they just. But it's the labor. It's the real labor that works on Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's all the full professors that get the Tuesday, Thursday.
Oh, okay, so you're saying you're actually part of the proletariat part
yes,
of the.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm the assistant professor. I don't get a choice.
Yes. Well, okay. So, and Weber State, well known for being snobby. There's Harvard,
very elitist. Very ivory tower.
I've only met one person that I like from Princeton. That's David Walsh. Of course, I know some of the professors there, but they're not from Princeton. So I like David, and I'm sure there's somebody else listening who's like, we're friends. I'm like, are we? Jerseyan. So, and then of course there's the Weber State people rocking out of Ogden, Utah, which is home to this weird ass guy, this like super fundamentalist, like bearded Christian shit posting troller on Twitter. Do you know this guy I'm talking about?
No.
Yeah. Okay. That'll get you in trouble. Like, do we have to already start editing out when I'm talking shit about religion? Yes.
Yeah. No, you need to send names over like ASAP so I can look at this dude.
If we're gonna talk about religion, I'm just gonna go on Papa Cold one right there. Fletcher, you better not edit that out. I'm drinking a Walter's Blood Orange Lager, which is here in Pueblo, Colorado. All right, so we're talking about Weber State. Where's Weber State, Leah? Where are you?
I am in Ogden, Utah. So we are considered, or Ogden. I say we now. I'm fresh out of Texas, but I say we now. So Ogden is considered the working class town of Utah, because it is the center of the railroad history. And so instead of the LDS church being at the center of the town, Union Station and the railroad is the center of the town. And so it got supposedly, and this is the history that was told to me when I first got here, supposedly because of that, because the temple is off center and not in the center. 25th Street is our famous street. Union Station is in the center of town. We are the working class The working class of Utah.
The working class of you. So the rest of everybody else, so our Provo listeners are like, the fuck, we have
Oh
jobs.
yeah, Provo is like elite elite private school.
Do you know that? Okay, so here's my Provo story. When I was like 19 years old, I'm working at Wendy's in Murray, Kentucky. And they used to make us watch these training videos. And all the training videos were shot in Provo, Utah, because apparently that was like the best Wendy's in the entire world. So I don't know what it is about our Provoans, a Provenant. Like, I don't know what a Utahn.
Utahn. I don't know what a
Utahn.
Provenite. I don't know. I have no idea.
Dorks in Provo. Man, when I look at the stats on this later on, we're going to take a real beating in the Rocky Mountain West. That's too bad. I was really hoping to capture something here with the Weaver State thing, but maybe next time we'll get Sarah Dant on here. Sarah's like, wait, what?
Right?
It's like, I barely know you, brah. Does Sarah Dant say bro or brah?
No, she's very proper, and I love her for it.
She seems lovely. I actually talked to her the other day about some work. She's like, I was like, West Shadow in the West. She's like, well, I have a new book. I was like, how could? And then I read it. So anyway, all right, what are you teaching over at the Working Class Institution?
In the Working Class Institution, I am the public history director. So this semester, I have Principles of Public History. I have our survey class, which is the 1700 for non-history majors. That's all of U.S. history in one semester. And then I have a Latinx experience class that I'm teaching.
Very nice.
I teach the labor history, I teach the women's history, and I teach progressive era history. Next semester, I'll have a class called Sex in the City. So that's
holy
really
shit. Okay, so tonight's film that we're talking about here is kind of a perfect triangulation of all this. And you had been on me for a while, like, hey, let's do Pretty Woman. Let's do Pretty Woman. I'm like, yeah. And I had thought, and this is me being stupid, I had thought from Texas, because you're always posting about violence in Texas on social media. I'm like, oh, you do Texas Rangers. Why aren't we? Why Chuck Norris? Little did I know I'd spend a lot of time this week thinking about Richard Gere, which is not usually a thing. I do, although I do like the meme from Officer and a Gentleman where he's like, I got no place else to go.
Right.
Fucking love this song. We're going to change the intro to like Love Lift Us Up Where We Belong. That's going to be the new intro. Fletcher, change the intro music to Historians of the Movies. When we come back to listen to this, we'll see if he's like if the spirit of Lou Gossett Jr. is coming in. And then maybe we can come back and we'll do Iron Eagle so I can like chappy it out.
That'll be a great one.
Yeah, like everybody who's our age grew up watching it. Okay, I have this thought on Iron Eagle. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. All right. Iron Eagle is to Top Gun what the GoBots were to Transformers. That's my jam.
I am fully in support of that. Absolutely.
As a fellow baby Gen Xer, because you and I are the fairy tale and I don't know if you feel this way or not. Like, I feel like a bit of a fraud because I'm like, I claim it.
I claim the Gen X group, but I am so far at the end of Gen X and not quite millennial that, I know that at some point, what was it, like 2016 or something, somebody came up with the term Xennial.
Right.
Yeah. So
feels right.
Yeah, it feels right. It's like we don't really, we're not like, we're forgotten like the Gen Xers, but we're not quite there with the millennials. And so I feel
not cool enough for either.
No, we're not cool enough for either. We're just smack there in the.
So let's talk about this movie that came out when we were 12 about prostitution. Like this is great.
Rank up, yeah.
I was thinking earlier today. I remember I was talking to my good friend Drew Harrell back when we were in like 8th grade, and we had our very first thing where we were ranking our favorite movies, and I ranked Pretty Woman as the best movie of the year.
Absolutely.
And then the other day, who was I talking to? The other day, I was talking to Lauren Lasab, and she had ranked. Do you know the song "King of Wishful Thinking" from this movie? Best fucking song. Oh my god, does that not ever? Can you how many times have you listened to King of Wishful Thinking just doing your shit? You're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, just because you have to
listeners.
But all of them, all of the songs, you had what Natalie Cole's
Wild Women Do.
Wild Women Do. Yeah.
That's a song I sing in the shower often. Like, yes, I'm getting ready to go write
Because
some
what you
reports.
only dream about, Wild Women Do.
Yes.
And who doesn't love Roxette? Like, come
Oh my
on.
God.
Who doesn't love
Oh,
Roxette?
I can see that video now, and I only know like that and like "She's Got the Look" by Roxette
She's
because
got
I'm like
the look.
again.
Those are the only songs you need to know. That will
Oh
get
my
you
gosh!
through
But the
any
video of like yes, this is
experience.
such a benchmark Hallmark movie, and I think it's so
Absolutely.
amazing because there's so much we can talk about in this film because it's Richard Gere, but this movie is Julia Roberts, right?
Oh, 100%. It sent her into the stratosphere.
The only thing I can think about is really actually maybe Top Gun, right? Which is
Yeah.
similar in the way that it catapulted Tom Cruise to the top. Because here was Julia Roberts. We'd seen her in Steel Magnolia, we'd seen her in Mystic Pizza, but
Mhm.
it's this movie that catapults her.
It just, yeah, it changes the dynamic of who she was. With Still Magnolias, she was that that kind of rebellious daughter, but sweet daughter. She dies in the end. Spoiler alert. I hope nobody. I
Well, yeah,
did not
everyone
spoil
dies in the end. Okay, for those of you who are not familiar with history, everyone dies at the end. It's true.
Yeah, it's true. And so, anybody that we fall in love with and that's still kind of a trope of the prostitution tale that, the good girl for here, the good girl who doesn't listen to her mother,
Mm-hmm.
dies in the end. And then, but then you get this redemption. And so this not only, redemption of prostitution, but redemption of Julia Roberts. And it, just kind of sends her to the stratosphere.
Yeah, I mean, for the next 20 years, the conversation on actresses in Hollywood is who's going to be the next Julia Roberts, right? Sandra
Absolutely.
Bullock is that for a while. Julia Ormond, we just did Legends of the Fall,
Mhm.
and listeners may have known my heart dropped out of my soul. Everything was about who's going to be the next Julia to
Yeah.
this day, and she's like Reba McEntire.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I was going to bring up Reba McEntire anyway, because I mean, look at what the late 80s, early 90s. Look at the music and the shows that you get out of prostitution. I mean, Fancy came out and we were all singing Fancy at the top of our voices. Come on.
Is that your
Right?
favorite Reba McEntire song?
I love, yes. One of
Is
the
it
reasons
really?
between that and Julia Roberts, it's the reason that I write about prostitution.
See, I am a One Promise Too Late guy because that song is fucking heartbreaking. The way she sings it, like mid 80s freaking Reba McEntire. You give me mid 80s. Here's the triumvirate of mid 80s. Reba, George Strait, Alabama.
Oh, absolutely.
Done. Like there's this thing going on right now about like your 20 favorite songs ever, and I'm listing them, and I've got to go Dixie, and you can only choose like one Alabama song. I'm like Dixieland Delight, gotta go because I drive around everywhere. I'm around Pueblo, Colorado. I'm like, what's up in my truck?
Right.
Spirit of Richard Gere be with us right now. What the fuck are we talking about today? This is all right. This is gonna be a pod. All right, good. Also, okay, so we've got the seminal moment. We've got this movie that absolutely explodes. It plays on lots of tropes that we're talking about, and then also we're the chemistry between Julia and Richard Gere.
It's
Phenomenal.
magical. I mean, the kisses are terrible. I cringe every single time they kiss in this movie. It's the worst. But their chemistry, the way that he looks at her, but she has to look innocent, right? She has to kind of portray this very innocent
She's a
and
sweet Southern girl, right?
sweet Southern girl from Georgia, from Milledgeville, Georgia. And so there's an innocence about her that he can't get enough of. He's this kind of hardened capitalist from New York City and, who doesn't talk to his dad. And his dad left his sweet, innocent music teacher mama. And so he, sees this sweet Southern girl from Milledgeville, Georgia, that got lost in the big city, and which of course is another part of the history of prostitution. But But yeah, and so, but the way that they look at each other, I mean, you can tell. I mean, I was one of those that was just over the moon when the other movie with the Runaway Bride came out, because I was just like, oh, they're back together. But they do have a great chemistry.
All right, I want to jump into a bunch of these tropes here in a little bit, but I want to talk first and foremost. I want to before we start jumping into these common tropes about prostitution or stories about prostitution or anything like that, or can we talk a little bit about your work and how you come to this particular line? Like, Leah, how did you come to this line of work?
So great.
You're a Southern girl.
I'm a Southern girl, and we just talk about prostitution all the time. We got to be good girls, but,
All right, so history of prostitution.
So history of prostitution. I was sitting in one of my master's classes, and we're reading a book that I actually can't recall off the top of my head, and it's about prostitution in, or I should say, prostitution reform in Great Britain, especially how it pertained to military camps, British military camps in the Commonwealth. And I was fascinated. I actually told my professor at the time, we had to go around and introduce ourselves. And I said, yes, my name is Leah, and this professor got me into prostitution, which he completely turned red, but I thought it was one of my best moments. But yeah, so I was fascinated. I was fascinated with the history of it. I lived in Dallas at the time. Dallas had several known historical red light districts. I grew up watching, Pretty Woman, listening to Reba McEntire, watching Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and
I was hoping we talk about Dolly. Yeah.
I mean, just so all of those were just kind of these myths or whatever. There's always just some kind of myth around this kind of good girl, bad girl. If you're a good girl and you do wrong, you could become, a bad girl with no safety net. And it was such a slippery slope, and it was such that thin line that you were always straddling, especially in the South. And so I was just fascinated with this idea of morality and girls that were considered fallen. And many times of no fault of their own. I don't kind of look at it as fault. I don't look at it as morality. My personal work for my master's thesis, I did a master's thesis on moral voyeurism. So I looked at prostitution journals. So preachers and other reformers who created purity journals, prostitution plays, and that became so popular that everybody was just fascinated with this idea of prostitution, this idea of cleaning up prostitution. But it became almost it became sensational, much like, any kind of magazine that centered on anything sex related. But those, of course, weren't banned by Anthony Comstock, where, other magazines that contained birth control devices or something else did. So I was fascinated at this thin line of morality and how girls have to fit into it. And so that's what I focused on. And then by the time I got to my PhD, I was really interested in the response of reformers. And one of the subjects that I came across was the way reformers were trying to moralize prostitution or moralize capitalism is to get industrialists to pay women more money. And so this is where this kind of shift happened, where prostitution was less about morality and more about economics and kind of this larger question. And so in the early 1900s, you have reformers trying to get state government. They tried to get a federal law that passed minimum wage for women. Woodrow Wilson didn't want anything to do with that. And so state by state, mostly Western states where women had the right, had suffrage, had the right to vote already. Yeah, they were able to pass minimum wage laws for women by connecting it to prostitution.
Now, here's my question. Is prostitution always linked to women? I say this because coming from Texas, what I find fascinating is actually the two most famous prostitutes in Texas are actually men, Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick. I mean, they'll throw the state out to anybody. I'm kind of wondering,
That's awesome.
Is prostitution always gendered like this? I mean, because one of the fascinating aspects of this film, of Pretty Woman, is that it's not a coincidence that Richard Gere, Edward in the film, our hero, if you will, our male hero, famously portrayed American Gigolo.
Absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm. So what's the dynamic here? When people are talking about prostitution, is it always women, or is there just a wink and a nod that also men are part of this? And when people are talking about prostitution, is it always in heteronormative terms, or are they talking about homosexual prostitution as well?
It's not. It's in the, especially as we go back to the early 20th century, it is heteronormative. It is very much gendered, and it's women, poor women, especially poor white women, especially, that are the ones that, like Julia Roberts in the movie, can be redeemed, right? Are redeemable. Right. There's a particular aspect. We know that homosexual, gay sex, gay prostitution, men paying for sex with other men happened. I mean, we have George Chauncey's Gay New York, right? We have
one of my favorite books I've ever read.
One of my favorite books of all time. And so we know that, what is it, the Bowery District with George Chauncey, we know that happens. However, that's not a part of the discussion. I think what we see with the common trope, and I know we're going to get to this, but with men are called gigolos, right? So even in American Gigolo with Richard Gere, it's an economic uplift, but he's uplifting himself. He is this kind of sexy character. He's the economic center. Even in Pretty Woman, where Richard Gere says to Vivian, to Julia Roberts, we're very similar creatures. We both screw people for money. Mm-hmm. But he's a man. He's a man in the economic center. He even says, I do it legally, except what I do is legal. What he does is praised, right? Because it's capitalism. This is like 1990s peak capitalism. How many, characters in movies at this time were portrayed as these acquisition, people that was like the capital, buy these companies and break them apart and sell them for parts, and whereas even Julia Roberts in the movie says sort of like stealing cars and selling them for parts, except it's legal. And so even, I guess, during the 90s, well, even now, probably to an extent, we don't talk about prostitution in a non-heteronormative sense. The idea of a prostitute, still, if you say prostitution, it's always of a woman that is kind of representing this sex industry where, men are escorts or men are gigolos, and it's not seedy. It's not, and I don't know if it's just because we don't talk about it. I guess, I don't know if it, on the flip side of that, the laws again at the time against gay sex were targeted at men. Sodomy laws and whatnot. You had prostitution laws, but most of them were concealed under the idea of vagrancy. And so prostitution wasn't something that was even discussed other than how to abolish it or how to protect women. So it was, even in the laws, it was very kind of heteronormative.
Doesn't this maybe kind of get back to ultimately control over women's bodies? I mean, thankfully, these debates are over now, and women have complete control of their bodies here in 2023.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want.
Right. But there is a long-standing assumption, like for men to have multiple sexual partners, conquests, if you will, it is praiseworthy. That man is a stud. We put them in very like bestial terms, like a racehorse or something like that. But for women, you would never call a man a whore. Maybe he's a man whore, but even you use that man in terms of to modify the term of whore,
Absolutely.
which goes to women. Am I right?
Yeah, which just means that he's sexually virile, and that's supposedly like this good thing. There's even, cultures that would take their 15-year-old boys or young boys to a sex worker, a woman, to get rid of his his virginity, because it was more appropriate for a man to go into a marriage not being a virgin. But women were supposed to go into a union being a virgin. So I don't know how you had that many non-virgin men and virgin women, but it's very much to control sexuality. But I do want to preface that it's about controlling white women's sexuality, especially in the South, because she is supposed to be sexually available for her husband, but only for her husband. And so controlling that and controlling her body, controlling who she's around, controlling, her decisions on sexuality is a big part of, especially, I mean, now, but especially in the early 20th century.
One of the things I'm interested in the way this film is perceived is the idea that Julia Roberts is essentially clean, right? She's a prostitute. She's managed. It's almost kind of a given that's never explicitly discussed. She doesn't do drugs. They always wear a condom, right? She is clean. And I'm kind of putting that in quotes, but I'm wondering, say, turn of the 20th century, how does prostitution, is it affected at all? These concepts of disease or with the eugenics movement, are there any, is that linked to those as well?
Yes. So, and people may correct me because I haven't done this particular stretch of research in a while, but from my master's thesis, what I remember is that, early anti-vice groups, they are trying to shut down prostitution because of this fear of of spreading venereal disease. And of course, it's the woman's fault. It's never the man's fault, right? And so there was this kind of time period in the late 19th century where prostitution is considered kind of a necessary evil. So when, good girls, wives are supposed to be, and it's very much a Victorian type trope. It wasn't necessarily like this, but the idea that you get from books like Charlotte Temple and, Kate Chopin's The Awakening, if you're in any way immoral as a good white girl, a good Southern white girl, then you die in the end, right? And so you're supposed to procreate with your husband, but you're not supposed to enjoy sex. You also, if you don't want to have 50,000 babies, prophylactics, any kind of contraceptive is illegal as well. And so you also have to not have sex with your husband, and you can't enjoy sex with your husband. It's only for procreation. And so society turned a blind eye to men going and having sex with prostitutes. Prostitutes in brothels were considered cleaner than the next step, which would be women working in cribs. This is where we get the term crib. And so you would have cribs were small little houses, shacks that were lined up, and they were like a quarter a pop, people kind of just lined up and would, come in was be the worst term I guess I could use, just one right after the other. And then of course the next step is street walking. And so those were the girls that were seen to be really less than, really not clean. But it's not until those venereal diseases in the early 20th century began to affect housewives that it becomes really, okay, we can't turn a blind eye to prostitution anymore. We need to clean it up. We need to shut down these red light districts. We need to, prosecute these women. They tried to prosecute men as well, but that didn't go over. Laws weren't really passed to keep men out of, brothels, but they would be to control the women in brothels. And some cities knew that they couldn't control it. So to keep women as, quote, clean as possible, they would legitimize prostitution in a way. For example, Waco, Texas, home of Baylor University. Waco was one of the only cities in Texas to have legal prostitution, to where the madams would have to pay, a regular fee. And then each woman that worked in the brothels would have to pay a medical fee, and they would have to have regular medical exams to make sure that they were not diseased. And if they were, then they had compulsory hospital stays.
All right, so two things are actually coming to my mind right now. And one is like the low-hanging fruit now of Forrest Gump, where I'm like, is this why Ginny had to die? Because she was sexually active and clearly did not enjoy sex with Forrest Gump?
The drugs, and she was a wild girl, and then she posed for Playboy, and,
so Alice Roosevelt.
Yeah, all of that leads to a disease in the end.
And the other thing you're talking about as far as like these levels of acceptance, now I'm thinking about like mid 20th century sexual understandings as they're presented on screen, and I'm thinking about Gunsmoke. James Arness, Miss Kitty, right? Mm-hmm. She clearly the love of the town sheriff's life. She's okay because she's the grand dame of the whorehouse, right? Am I correct?
Absolutely. Well,
so she's okay.
Yeah, and brothel keepers, madams, they had power. They had financial security. I mean, how many professions, especially in the early 20th century, could women have to where they had complete financial security? That the man was not the center, the economic center. There were none.
We're talking about tropes that Pretty Woman plays up to. By now, every person in America has seen this movie. If we're going to spoil this movie, which is, by God, 34 years old now? Comes out
no.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it.
I'm going to have to go take my vitamins now before I go to bed. My sleep aids.
So what are the tropes that this film plays in on, and where are some points to like where we're missing out here?
So from a historian perspective, in that I picked up on, because I've watched this movie 1,000 times. And so as I'm watching it, doing more and more of my own research, I'm like, oh my God. So there's a great book by Katie Johnson called Sisters in Sin, Brothels Drama. I just find it fascinating. So in the early 1900s, prostitution plays, as they were called, were one of the most famous genres at the time. And I'm talking about off Broadway. They would play on Broadway. They would go all over the nation. And they were so popular that hundreds and hundreds of people would go and watch these prostitution plays. There was even in New York, I think it was the prostitution play Zaza. The city government tried to prosecute the lead actress because, it was a lewd play, and then the jury had to go and watch it 7 times to make sure that it wasn't that it wasn't illegal. And so these plays were wildly popular, but a lot of these plays were stolen. The plot was stolen from a French play that was about a prostitute. But in the American version, the woman is redeemed at the end. So always by a man, always by a group of women who are reformers, who are anti-vice reformers, and they redeem her, marry her off. A man sweeps her off her feet, marries her off to this man. She is now redeemable. Will she ever be able to lose the prostitute, label? Most women no, but in the prostitution plays, yes. And so that's where kind of Pretty Woman really picks up. Is you have this sweet Southern girl who made good grades in high school. She just followed a man. She followed her heart to the city. And then once she got to the city, she couldn't hold down a job. She couldn't afford anything. So what did she turn to? She turned to prostitution. It's the same argument that's used in the early 20th century by progressive reformers, is that these good girls are leaving the country, they're leaving rural areas, and they're going into the city looking for work, seduced by a man, and they're falling into prostitution because, they can't make ends meet. And they're poor. And this is the exact same through line, the thread that connects them. And so Julia Roberts in this movie has to be redeemable. She has to be somebody that we're on her side to get out of this profession that's deemed immoral. But she's not immoral. She fell into this oldest profession because she was seduced by a man. But it's another man that is able. It's a successful man. It's a man that's centered in capitalism that is able to get her, to redeem her.
This sounds so familiar to me, because I was once a young person from the South and couldn't find a job. And then I fell into academia. Right?
Right.
It was a morally repugnant thing to be into history. And I kept looking for someone to redeem me, and then that never happened. So here I am stuck.
Yeah. I mean, we have to prostitute ourselves out in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah, but okay, so getting back to this, though, there's a twist on this, right? Because there's very much explicitly even that Richard Gere is also a prostitute, right? He is also a whore. He has sold himself. He has sold his soul. And ultimately, very much she rescues, there at the very end, what do you say? She rescues him right back, right? Because he is also in search of salvation. And it kind of takes these two people to find each other. And of course, we see at the very end, right? He's in his business life. He's choosing to not break up the company, not sell himself out. He makes that very real turn against, I guess, maybe we might consider his lawyer the pimp, and to my three best friends who are all attorneys. Isn't that a bit of a twist on this as well?
It's a twist.
Does he rescue her? Or does she rescue him back? Is my point.
I think this is very much about redeeming her. It's part of the trope that it takes a woman to redeem a man's heart, right? That it's not necessarily his business acumen or his, he's not becoming anti-capitalist. He's doing exactly, he's still building ships and making chingos of money, but he rescues her, or he redeems her from this life of immoral. And women can be immoral by not fitting into this idea of sexually belonging to a man, to one man. And so he redeems her that way. He rescues her that way. The way women rescue men that this movie very much links into is that women are supposed to rescue men by opening their hearts, right? By making them more sensitive, by connecting them to good kind of moral behavior, moral sensitive, heartfelt behavior. And so I think that while
This is me laughing at the idea of that, but go on.
So I think that while it does, there can be, and I love this movie. I do not want to say anything that people will be like, no, it's feminist or any kind of way, but it very much belongs to the idea that women are supposed to protect, or women are supposed to rescue a man's heart, and a man is supposed to rescue a woman financially, economically.
Thank God for academia. Yeah,
I
that's
know,
totally
right?
happened. All right, I want to talk about our other prostitute that we see in the film, Kit,
Okay.
played by Laura San Giacomo, who
Love
I
Kit.
adore. Love her in Quick Lay Down Under. She's so
Yeah.
great. Was it? And she was on a TV show. Something I'm blanking on it. Was it
Just Shoot Me?
she was on? I can't recall. It was.
I don't remember, but I think so.
I think it was.
Just Shoot Me.
And she's
I think
tremendous.
so.
So if I'm wrong, Fletcher, just edit me out so I sound smart. Insert Fletcher's voice over my own. Loved her. So Kit represents what could have happened, right, to Vivian, right? Kit very much into drugs, wants to get the pimp, has to be rescued by Vivian, although I don't know that that's going to happen. Like,
so she's she's that mother figure, right? She's the brothel figure. It's very much kind of the madam. Like, she's not going to get out. She may try to get out of the profession, but she's the one that brings Vivian into it. But she protects her in some ways. She gives her a place to live. She kind of teaches her the ropes of how to stay safe. She says no pimps, right? Which I think is a huge part that's often overlooked, because it is about it goes back to the idea that of madams, that women are protecting other women in this profession. So you don't really get the pimps. I mean, they're there, but they're not as exclusively the bosses until into the 1920s, when the federal government actually does away with a lot of the red light districts in order to bring in military bases into cities. And so that's where you get more of the pimps, and pimps aren't looking out for other women the same way that a brothel keeper, a madam, would. And so Kit very much plays that role, but she also plays the kind of the street sense, the streetwise, to this very naive, Southern girl who doesn't really know the ropes. And, we see Kit at the end that, she is into the drugs, but she still keeps her feet underneath her because of, the sweetness and hard work of Vivian. And you see her at the very end, like, she's thinking about going, what was it, to do a coursework in cosmetology or something. And so she's thinking about it, but we never get to see her leave it. But she's kind of our reality. She's our toe into reality. I mean, who does it work out for, right? Cinda fucking Rella.
it's too bad she doesn't go into cosmology, and this movie isn't set like 10 years earlier, and she could have been advising President Reagan on foreign policy. She'd be like, the stars are aligned, and he's like, what? I don't know. It's my very first Ronald Reagan. I don't know. So there you go, Happy. It's not as good as my Clinton, which is very good. So I would like to come on this podcast. If you're not sitting, I can do the hand. So,
well, I mean,
anyway.
Clinton, Pretty Woman, it goes together. It goes together.
Does it? Well, okay, so we've got to talk about this, because we've got to talk about prostitution and presidents. And the most recent thing I'm thinking about is Donald Trump and the Stormy Daniels relationship. Why was that embraced by his followers, by largely Christian folks who said it's okay? It's $130,000. Who doesn't have that?
Because men are the center, women are to blame. Women are the ones who either can, pull men's heart up and protect their heart, or pull men's heart down and pull them down. And so because Stormy Daniels was in the sex industry, she's automatically seen as somehow not credible, not as worthy. Of course, there's this beautiful woman in the sex industry, and maybe Donald Trump slipped, and all men do it. It's the same kind of trope of turning the blind eye to men having sex, men having sex outside of marriage, men having these moments of immorality, where if a woman has a moment of immorality, if she has a career that is considered immoral, then there is no redemption. And so with Stormy Daniels being in the sex industry, it was going to be more about her tempting Trump rather than Trump, which I find fascinating, especially since, I think we're too young to remember it, but who was now his name just left my brain. The candidate where the woman sat on his lap and there was a picture taken and his whole career was over. Who was that?
Santa Claus. The
Yeah.
woman sat on his lap and he was like, I'll give you anything you want. Just stay here. So I don't remember. I didn't get into politics till I don't know. It's like, but I definitely think that had we had a woman president with a fair electoral college, we would have. But had we had a woman president who turned out had slept with a man and then paid him off,
that would have been amazing.
Right? This is the low hang. Of course, things would have been different. Here's my question for you. I want to introduce a new segment here on Historians of the Movies podcast. I'm calling it The Sweetest Thing, dedicated to the godfather of historical presentism, former AHA president James Sweet. And I would like to know, I'm going to go to hell. How does this movie change? Does this movie have an effect in the way that prostitution has changed over the way that people view prostitution in, say, the last 34 years? Or maybe how has American perceptions of the oldest profession changed since, say, the early 20th century into now 2023? Where were we and where are we now when it comes to sex work?
That is a great question. I think that we are trying to talk about sex work in a different light. I think that there's some real conversations about decriminalizing sex work, or at least decriminalizing it for women. I don't think that there are enough conversations of how to keep women safe. We still live in a patriarchal society. We still live in a society where, where women are scared every time, they leave their homes. And so I don't think that we've looked at root causes of prostitution. I don't think that we've really kind of looked at how to keep women safe, the ones who choose to go into sex work. I still think that there's a conversation to be had, which, is part of my work, and to look at the kind of the economic reasons that women go into sex work. We're still paid less than men. Many women who, we have a caste system in the US. So lots of times, if you're born into poverty, if you're born into families with, drug addictions or onto the wrong side of town, it's very difficult to get out of that. If you're if family members are in the sex industry, lots of times women will be in the sex industry. So I don't think that we fully have engaged, larger conversations of economics, of safety, of, healthcare of women in the sex industry, choice to go into the sex industry. A lot of women, make that choice. And we have talked about decriminalization, but I think that as wrong as the progressive era was, I think that there are discussions around prostitution and sex work deserve a second look. Equal pay for equal work, that was one of the things that they touted, while it was mostly to uphold white supremacy, because most of the reformers were just focused on white women. I think protection of women, of all women, protection of economically center women, I think that those are all still really important discussions to have, especially around sex work. Do I think it should be criminalized? No.
There was the next question I was going to go into. It's like, should sex work be criminalized? And I've got another question for you, which I want to see if I can ask you this. Are Edward and Vivian still together?
No.
Leah Lagrone does not believe in love. Wow. Okay, cool. Neat. Why aren't they together?
Because men will always have a problem with women's past. He's always, just at the very end, he said, "I've never treated you like a prostitute." And she said, "You just did.
Yeah. Who leaves who? Does he leave her? Does she leave him?
She leaves him.
I hope she leaves him. I hope they're still together. I hope that they find one another.
I love that you believe in love and romance.
Somehow.
That makes my heart happy, and we will go with your narrative, and I will.
I only have one couple that I don't think are still together. I believe in all couples are still together, except for Baby and Johnny from Dirty Dancing, which is like my number 7 favorite film of all time.
I love that movie.
Of course, we still haven't done it on HATM, and I'm dying to do that film. We can do it we'll do it on the pod. Like, we still haven't done it. It hasn't been available in 5 years. We've been running HATM. Still haven't done it.
Okay, so I'm talking to you about it. You just schedule me into Dirty Dancing. We're doing it.
Okay, that's fine, because we can go third greatest soundtrack of all time.
Oh my gosh, I will.
Okay, those two are not together. And I think it's well known. Have you seen La La Land?
I haven't.
Oh my God, the last 10 minutes of La La Land. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I'm on record. I've never thrown a television through a wall before, but that was the movie that made me almost do it. And I'm going to have to do La La Land whenever I can summon the emotional resilience to handle that film.
Well, now I need to watch it just so I can see why you would have, chosen that route.
Good luck. I'm not doing it again. All right, I got another question for you. Let's do this. If we make Pretty Woman in 2023, what changes? Does anything change if we make this film?
Oh gosh, Jason, that's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I would like to see Edward not be the rich bastard he is. I think that maybe in 2022, she's the one that has the economic power.
But if she has the economic power, like, does she need a gigolo?
No, she gets to fall in love with someone, and she gets to, rescue him. I mean, she doesn't necessarily.
I just realized we've seen this movie.
Where?
It's the one with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds. She's the powerful,
Absolutely.
wealthy boss. He's the Ryan Reynolds, a regular looking guy, which is why he's married to Blake Lively. But ha!
I mean, you can't win them all.
Yes, he's settled, I guess. Call me Blake. All right, I want to get back into the history part of this, because people are like, isn't there history in historical movies? Maybe. You're working on your book now? What's going on with your work?
I submitted my book proposal to Oklahoma.
Oh, me too. Who are you working? Are you working with Joe Schiller over there?
I am. Love
Isn't Joe the best?
He's
oh my God, he just won a big award for his dissertation. He's the best, dude.
Love Joe. Yeah.
Everybody should stop publishing with Harvard and Oxford and everyone else and go to Oklahoma.
Go to Oklahoma.
Joe's the shit. Okay, talk to me about maybe 3 books that really influenced your work. If you're going to say, hey, here's 3 books that you want to learn about the history of prostitution or sex work, I guess those are the same things. What should we be reading?
So I think you have to start, because we're historians, we always have to do historiography, right? So I think you have to start with Ruth Rosen's Lost Sisterhood. You have to do Barbara Mill Hobson's, Uneasy Virtue. You have to do Kathy Pice's Cheap Amusements, right? To kind of understand what's happening in this time period. But I think you go with For Business and Pleasure. I think LaShawn Harris's Sex Workers, Psychics, and Number Runners, it blew me away. I love that book. Sisters in Sin, I think that, by Katie Johnson, I think that those are really good. There's so much good out there that looks at prostitution, but not only that, the reformers and how, the Mark Thomas Connolly's book, that is just central is, the response to prostitution by progressive reformers. I think that's what started it all for me anyway.
Wow. See, I did not get a chance, aside from Chauncey's Gay New York, which isn't necessarily about prostitution, though it factors into there. And again, major shout out. Remember that was a book that I was like, I would never read. This is the reason when you go to college, you read these books that you never thought you would read, and then they blow your fucking mind.
Blow your mind. Like you'll never
be the same.
Never be the same.
Everybody should go read Gay New York like right now. after the read the books you recommended, because that would be me mansplaining, which would be a weird. Go read Leah's books first, but also Gay New York because you said it was good too. Prostitutes in film. Who do you like?
Watch Harlots. Watch The Deuce. Oh my gosh, that show blew me away.
The Deuce? What's The Deuce?
On HBO with Gyllenhaal, Maggie Gyllenhaal. To see this progression into... So Harlots, of course, focuses on England and brothels in, I think, the late 1700s. And then you get the 1970s in New York of these women who, some have pimps, some don't, some move on from working the street into pornography and how, that evolved. Watch Pose for, Black women, for Black trans women. That there's so much that has been done over the last 10 years on the history of prostitution that's actually felt like they consulted historians for these films, and they're not films, they're series. And I think with a series there's so much more that can be explored, and looking at that history and being a historian of prostitution and watching The Deuce and watching Pose, it completely blew my mind. So that's juxtaposing or putting together, the 1970s with The Deuce to the 1980s, going into the AIDS crisis with Pose.
Have you seen the Showtime series American Gigolo with John Bernthal? Have you checked that out yet?
I haven't.
I watched a little bit of it because I think John Bernthal is like film magic. You drop him into anything. Did you watch The Bear?
I did. Dude.
Okay, so quick sidebar about, first of all, I love Chicago and I love The Bear, but you have no idea Bernthal's in the show at all. They say nothing about it, and then John Bernthal shows up and for an hour just drops Bernthal fucking magic, and he does this in everything he's in. If he's in Fury, he's in whatever. He's my favorite character in The Walking Dead. Like, did you watch Walking Dead with him when that was on? Oh my god, he was the best. With him and Shane, was the best. Anyway, loved it. Thoughts on Best Little Whorehouse in Texas?
Dolly Parton is a dream, and I would never, say anything negative about Dolly Parton. And then you throw Dolly Parton and oh gosh, I just lost his name.
Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds. It was Burt Reynolds, or it was Kenny.
Or Kenny Rogers?
Kenny Rogers.
Islands in the Stream?
Yeah.
Well, Burt Reynolds was in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. But
was he?
Dolly and Kenny, but Dolly and Kenny made the single greatest duet of all time, which is actually a cover.
Yeah.
Islands in the Stream, single greatest of all time of any music in the history of ever.
Ever. And so, but it's a great film. It captures a lot of Texas lore, especially, it being
we have to do a Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
100%. It captures the lore of like the Texas A&M football players going and, visiting the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. To get their rocks off. It explores, supposedly the last brothel. I argue and something else that I'm working on, that it's not the last big brothel in Texas. But it's the last one that kind of, or one of the last ones in the 70s that makes a big national splash. And so
is that the one that created Greg Abbott?
Greg Abbott he's his own pimp, and he pimps himself out.
He pimps out Dan Patrick. He's very efficient.
He is.
Okay, back to Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. I like this because I get to say whorehouse a whole lot in context with this, so I can be like, hey, what about that whorehouse movie? And it feels okay. But it gives us also one of the best Christmas songs ever, Hard Candy Christmas. Do you know the song?
Yes.
Holy shitballs. If you're listening and you haven't listened,
all these songs.
fucking Hard Candy Christmas. Hey. What? Oh my God.
Are you going to sing?
Shit. I will make a goddamn I don't even want
to. We have to do History at the Movies karaoke.
No, we don't. That'd be the death knell of that. But Hard Candy Christmas, man, that is, oh God, that is such a sad. I love you, Dolly Parton. We don't deserve you.
Oh, we do not deserve Dolly.
All right, Leah Lagrone. Let's come back to our final question here. Pretty Woman. Is it a history film?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is quintessential late 80s, early 90s history. I mean, you cannot watch that movie without, if you're a historian of prostitution, you see the connections to early 20th century, but that movie is a time capsule within itself. I mean, you've got the history of capitalism. You have the history of, the South. You have this idea that, I mean, look at Beverly Hills. How many movies in the 1980s and 90s were about Beverly Hills?
Oh my God, can I interject for a second? I went furniture shopping the other day because when I moved from Florida to Colorado, I brought jack shit over here, right? And I literally had this in my moment when I was at American Furniture Warehouse here in Pueblo, not sponsoring the show, but I was going with this very nice guy named Mike. I was pointing out shit. I was like, I'll take that. And I swear to God, I had the scene in my head. I felt pretty.
Yeah, right.
And look, there's a couch behind me. It's got pillows and everything. For those of you who don't know, I have couches with pillows. I have bourgeoisie, baby. I teach on Mondays and Wednesdays. No Fridays over here. Go on. I brought that shit all the way back.
Right? And, people just sucking up to you because you have that credit card. That's all it was.
Oh my gosh. I went to a wedding over the weekend to my dear, wonderful friends of the podcast, Adam Blackler and Melissa Hampton, who I truly just adore and was so honored to be at the wedding.
They were great pictures.
Oh my gosh, they were. I know you from Twitter. I was like, oh my God, please, not tonight. Not tonight. I'm on glass of number 10 of wine. I do not know what I'm going to sink, how bad I'm about to sink this thing. All right. You were saying Pretty Woman is a history film.
Yeah. Even when they pick up the landline phones, it just made me laugh. right?
God, such an artifact. Absolutely.
Such an artifact.
Oh, can we talk about Hector Elizondo real fast?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is my first introduction to Hector Elizondo. We actually, early in the podcast, we ended up doing the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, where he's like 25 and he's a complete psychopath. And I didn't know that about him. All I knew him was the kind-hearted hotel manager. And then going back to see him as like a complete crazy. I love Hector. What's your thoughts on Hector Elizondo?
I think that he did just a brilliant job with,
Love him.
with being just the person that changes his mind, right? That sees somebody for who they really are. He's playing this very kind of posh snob in the hotel industry, and he's really just like her, right? He's just somebody playing a part. And
when he takes her and he teaches
teaches her the tines, just count the
still
tines.
Do that.
Right?
You work your way out from outside to inside.
Right? I still, every time I look at the table, I'm like, yeah, I'm Julia Roberts. I have no idea where they go.
Oh, can we talk about the scene with the necklace and where she snaps him and where he snaps her hand with the necklace and she does the laugh.
And that is what sealed it, because I mean that
single
was
best life.
That
in history.
That scene played over and over because it encapsulates that line that she says when her and Kit are at the swimming pool and says, it's easy to clean up when you have money, right? And she's in that red dress which is,
for fuck's sake,
I mean, just
God
fabulous. Just, she's statuesque. She's stunning.
Still stunning.
Ages just wonderfully. Gives the rest of us who can't afford Botox, something to look forward to. That
I can't afford Botox. I'm aging great. Go on. That's wearing my cutoffs t-shirt. Right?
But she's a redhead. We didn't have a ton of redheads to kind of look up to, but and then you have this $250,000 necklace, and she's just wide-eyed, like this is not happening. This is something that could never happen to somebody like me. And it snaps on her hand, just kind of very symbolically. You can touch it, but you can't have it. And then she just it startles her. She laughs, and then it becomes, he puts it on her neck. And so there was just that moment of laughter, of something that they could laugh about, that they could be in common with. And it's magical. Yeah. I love that scene.
I know we've been trying for years. Have we ever replicated Julia Roberts? Do we have a Julia Roberts now?
Oh, I don't think so.
You can't replicate Clark Gable, right? You can't replicate Robert Redford. You can just accept Brad Pitt and accept George Clooney.
Julia Roberts will always
Did you just give me a face at Brad Pitt? It is well known I am a Brad Pitt fanboy till I die.
I love that. I love that for you. I do.
He's going to go in 30 Dancing 3. All right. I have one last thing to tell you, which is maybe I'll dye my hair. Maybe I'll move somewhere. Maybe I'll buy a car. I've got the lyrics right in front of me. I go all night. So, Leah Lagrone, where can people find you on Twitter, X, wherever? Where can people find you now?
I'm on X still. Leah Leah L.A. Ochoa or something like that. I don't even remember what my handle is, but I'm still on Twitter, X, or whatever it's called. And then I'm on Instagram. I'm old.
Every time I hear it X, I go into DMX in my head, which is awful because I'm a 46-year-old hillbilly from Kentucky singing X gonna give it to you.
I mean, I could rap the whole thing of DMX. It's just part of our generation.
Change that. Fletcher, close us out with DMX.
Right.
Now that we've mentioned it, it's historical. We can bring it in. I think we're okay with the with the copyrights. Leah Lagrone, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was good to see your face.
And that's a wrap here at Historians of the Movies podcast. Thank you so much to our guest, Leah Lagrone, for dropping in today and talking to us about Pretty Woman and this conversation we had. Thank you, of course, to our intrepid producer, Fletcher Powell. You can find him on Twitter, X, whatever the fuck we call it these days, at Fletcher_Powell. Thank you, of course, to you guys for continuing to listen in, to join in, to share along. What a fun pod this was today. So keep sharing your friends, keep sharing this, keep telling your friends about it. Keep coming back. Guys, I'm exhausted tonight. It's well past my bedtime, but thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed the pod today. I couldn't do this without you. So until next time, ciao for now, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.